My name is James Galvin. I'm primarily a poet, though I'm guilty of 2 books of prose as well. I'm from the Mountain West. I still have a big part of my heart there. The reason I'm in Iowa is because of the Writers' Workshop, and the reason I don't leave Iowa is I love Iowa City. It's a great town. But the reason I haven't ever taken any offers to go to parts of America where I might feel, more comfortable in the landscape, like where I could ski and rock climb and ride horses in the mountains and stuff like that, is because of the students that I have here. I wouldn't trade the students at the workshop for any physical location or any other institution. In what I do, I have the best job in the world. So I stay. My students are amazing. They're really smart. They're really talented. They're very demanding. But I get back a lot from them just because they are the future of American poetry. They hand me a poem and they say, "What do you think of this?" And I think about it, and then I try to be honest with them. And hopefully I can tell them something lasting and give them a sense that they're not alone in this. And that, as the short fiction writer Leonard Michaels used to say, writing isn't work, it's just really, really hard. And they have to embrace that. And I try to encourage them to be fearless and to not conform to any kind of school or group or cult of poetry, but to just find their way to writing in a way that nobody else can write. It's theirs alone. I actually believe all the essays to the contrary, I've read them. I believe in originality. And I think that's all that matters. I'm not interested in schools and movements. I'm just interested in how much horsepower is under their hood. Every place I go seems pretty quiet because I don't hang out, very much. I don't consort. But yeah, I have a study in my attic here in Iowa City. I have a room I can go to out west when I'm there. The problem with out there is there's so many things that are easier to do than writing, like digging post holes, breaking colts, a lot easier than writing. But yeah, I have places, but I also do a lot of writing, walking, I don't write that much. I don't write that often. I don't write hundreds of drafts like a lot of people do. I think about stuff for a really long time before I try to write something down, because for me, at any rate, in regard to whatever the trigger for a poem is, whether it's a phrase or an image or something that's bothering me or something I heard somebody say or an idea for a poem, there's such a thing as too soon and there's such a thing as too late. And it's all about knowing when to move on it. No, I think when I was younger, I used to write a lot of drafts, or I used to write more drafts. And I think it's great for people to do that as long as the process of revision is a process of revision or re-envisioning, so that as much creative magic can happen during that process as can happen, when you're writing the first draft or the first line or whatever. It's just that as I get older, I guess I do a lot of the deleting and the changing and the discovering in my head. It's much more of a meditative thing than it is about scribbling. I do write by hand, and I do use a manual typewriter. I've never written anything into a computer. Computers is just a place to keep things. It's partly tactile reason. I envy painters for having such a physical relationship with what they do, and like they actually get to like move their bodies and throw paint around and stuff like that. So the closest I can get is, manual typewriters are great because, I don't. In my day, they didn't teach typing to men; they just taught it to women. So I type Clark Kent style, and it's very slow, which gives me time to think about what I'm writing. But I really like that the lever, you hit that key, and this catapult comes up and goes thwack, and it makes an actual imprint on the page that's a physical mark. I look at a computer screen, I don't know where those words are. I think on my own work, the influence is very much in flux. My best teacher, my greatest teacher, I had the great good fortune to study with Donald Justice when I was a student here, and I would like to think he left a mark. But with poetry, I would like to think that I'm influenced by everything I've ever read. And so, from Homer to the present, there's something in everything that I can make use of. So if you ask me who my favorite poet was, I'd say, well, nobody's better than Shakespeare, nobody's better than Dante. And I'd like to think that those have been influences, but those are pretty huge influences. Dante wrote out of knowing. He's one of the people who wrote out of knowledge and not out of the anxiety of not knowing. I write out of the anxiety of not knowing. And I would say, I could just go through a list of, the metaphysical poets and the modernists and the contemporary poets who mattered to me, but it wouldn't be a meaningful list. I think it's interesting in fiction. I read a lot of fiction for a poet. And I read usually fairly esoteric works for completely escapist reasons, which I'm not sure what's up with that. But I could tell you in fiction that my favorite writer is William Faulkner, but my favorite book is Moby Dick. But about poetry, I can't say anything but nobody's better than Shakespeare and nobody's better than Dante. I think that writing, being peripatetic and meditative is a way of just not sitting still. And I mean, I've always been, I think, deeply in my body. So it's hard for me to sit still for a really long time. But you have to write. And so then you have to do something else. You have to go ride a horse, or you have to climb a mountain, or you have to put on some skis, or you have to go for a run, or you have to do something that takes the fatigue out of your brain and puts it in your body where it's a much better feeling. Being tired in your body feels great. Being tired in your mind, not so much. Oh, it better, or else I'm screwed. I'm not sure why one would do this unless it was asking really hard questions, and that's always going to lead you into that realm. Not that those questions will ever be answered. There are very few poets in the history of literature that I know about who write out of a sense of knowing. Blake wrote out of a sense of knowing. Milton wrote out of a sense of knowing. Walt Whitman wrote out of a sense of knowing. But I think most poets, writers historically have written out of the anxiety of not knowing. So what are the things we don't know about? You know, what are the things that you need the language of poetry to talk about because we can't talk about them? And that, again, leads you to that realm of spiritual questioning, and it leads me away from propaganda. I would love to write a short story. I've never written a short story. I have no idea. I know when I read a short story that's a good short story. You know, when I read Chekhov, I know that I'm reading good stories, but I have no idea how it's done. So, of course, that's what I want to do.